Guys, before we jump into the video, just wanted to address yesterday's video, which was the best picks in each round video. We're seeing some critical feedback on that, and a lot of you guys are saying how these players don't actually go with their ADP, and therefore the video is useless. We want to kind of scale things not only from a competitive sense, but also a casual sense. So those of you that are just new to fantasy hockey or aren't as experienced, giving you guys a sense as to who would be available within these ADP ranges and the best picks for each of those. So again, open to feedback on that if you guys want to go check out that video. Always want to produce some good content for you guys moving forward. But in this video, this one should be a lot more applicable to more or less everybody. We're going to go over the worst pick in each round, which is kind of still relevant to their ADP, but at the same time, it should give you a better sense in terms of who not to pick, which you're going to come to circumstances where these players actually fall within their ADP range as you're kind of going through your draft. So this should be a bit more applicable to everybody across the board, whether it's casually or competitively. But these are the worst possible picks that you could have in the first 12 rounds of your draft. Now, there really isn't a bad pick in round 1 or round 2 or round 3, and you'll see that in the video. But I think where I'm at with Connor Hellebuyck is, given his ADP at 9.1, it's really dependent on your league settings. I'm not saying that you can't take a goalie in the first round, but I just think that they're more volatile and more risky than some of the other players within this range. Helly has been incredibly consistent, don't get me wrong, and I have no reason to believe that anything will change going into next season. But I also said the exact same thing about Igor Shesterkin. And up until last year, that was our stance on him as well. He was one of the more consistent goalies in the National Hockey League. He got a ton of wins. He got a ton of volume. And it's basically the same narrative up until it actually changes. And I'm not saying that it is going to change for the Jets next year, but I'm just saying that when it comes to goaltending, I think in round 1, you should go with an elite upside player or grab like a Cale Makar, or if you're picking in the later rounds of your draft, maybe go with a Quinn Hughes and just start your draft off with something that you know is incredibly consistent on a year-to-year basis. And even though Helly is an incredibly consistent goalie, I think that there is still some risk in picking a goaltender. So that's my selection for round 1. Honorable mention is Kirill Kaprizov. He's just an injury risk at this point, guys. He needs to play 75 games in order for him to hold value at his current ADP at 6.8. We know he's an absolute freak of nature when he does play, and he is one of the better fantasy hockey players given his shot volume and his goal upside, as well as those power play points that he gets. Plays a really good position in left wing this year. And I think for Krill, all he needs is to stay healthy. The problem is that he hasn't done that over the past couple of years. Very similar to a Jack Hughes in that sense. So I think if there's another risky pick in that first round, it's probably Kirill Kaprizov for me. Fingers crossed he stays healthy for the entire duration of the season. Round 2 is Andrei Vasilevskiy, and I get a sense that something isn't right here. He hasn't skated yet this season. The Lightning isn't really talking about it too much. Like, they haven't really given a critical update in terms of why Vasi hasn't seen any ice time whatsoever over the first couple weeks of camp, and it's now bleeding into preseason. And I'm getting a sense of some concern here. So that kind of bumps him down the list for round 2, just given the fact that I think there's a more significant injury here at play. Again, keep an eye open and see what happens over on X. You can follow us on Twitter as well for any critical lineup updates moving forward, as well as join our Discord, guys. Guys are talking about it constantly in the Discord, but I'm just getting a sense that like there's something off of Vasilevskiy. He had a really good year last year. There's nothing really wrong with him as a goalie as well. And again, round 2 still is probably a little bit early for me for a goalie given his ADP. But I do think there's more play here, and I don't think the Lightning have really addressed this yet. So it could be an injury, and it could be bleeding into the season. Just keep an eye open for that. But my honorable mention here is Jack Eichel. I know he had a fantastic year last year, but he does, again, come with some injury risk. Very similar to the guys I mentioned earlier that have the same concerns, like Kirill Kaprizov, like Jack Hughes. And so I think, I need to see it again from Eichel going into next year. There's a lot of safe selections in round 2. You can go across the board. You can get like a Philip Forsberg, who's got a really high floor. You can go Mitch Marner, even, who's basically like a 95 to 100 point player. And Eichel does have his benefits, but he also locks you at center as as being only center eligible. So for those reasons, I think Jack is an honorable mention for the worst pick in round 2, just given some of the safer options available to you. Round 3, again, there's some amazing players available in round 3, and Jason Robertson is not a bad pick in my opinion, but I do think he's the worst pick in this range. You have a ton of opportunity to go with guys that have some upside, that, you know, have a much better shot volume or goal upside. And for J-Rob, we've just seen a steady decline in both ice time and goal scoring and shot volume over the past 3 seasons. It's been a consistent thing up until this point. I'm curious now, we've seen line rushes with him, but it seems like he's not skating on a line with Mikko Rantanen or Wyatt Johnston. So that, again, is a bit of another red flag for me. It seems like he's skating alongside Roope Hintz. Again, I don't think J-Rob is a bad pick in this range. I just think that I would explore other options that were available to me, just given the fact that we have seen a steady decline in production and shot volume over this course of this time. And then round 3, Mackenzie Blackwood, it seems like he's injured currently. Again, we don't advise taking goalies super early in your draft. It is dependent on your league setting. So if you do need to grab a goalie early, Blackwood's not a terrible pick. I just don't think he's going to start the season necessarily, given his injury currently. So something to keep an eye out for him. Like I said, there is a ton of great picks within this range. So I think you can go in other directions for round 3. Round 4 is Matthew Tkachuk. Again, the first 3 rounds were kind of toss-ups, guys, that like it's hard to pick somebody in that range. We were like, this guy's not a good pick. But I actually think that Matthew Tkachuk is not a good pick at his current ADP. You're not going to get this guy until likely January, and that's assuming that he's going to be 100% and ready to go for the Olympics. If that is the case where he isn't 100% and he still decides that he wants to play in the Olympics, it could very well impact the rest of his season moving forward. I think in redraft leagues, his ADP is going way too early. I talked about it in a recent mock draft with Nate from Apples and Ginos. I don't think that I'm going to touch this guy until maybe round 6. I just want to be as safe as possible in my first 3, 4, 5 rounds of this draft and get the players that I think are going to absolutely go off this year. And drafting a Matthew Tkachuk in the first 4, maybe even 5 rounds, just you have to ensure that your team is strong enough from the beginning to survive up until that point and then put yourself in a position to win. And that's assuming that everything goes according to the current schedule. There's no setbacks. There's nothing that happens in the Olympics with Matty Tkachuk. So I think that his ADP just warrants him going a bit too high currently, and I would look for him, like I said, in round 5 and 6. And then Alex Ovechkin already has suffered an injury in preseason. He hasn't been skating. He's just getting old, guys. Like the greatest goal scorer of all time, like no doubt, like an incredible player, great in fantasy as well because of his shot volume and his hit total and then the goal upside. But I do think we're going to start to see a slight decline. And I honestly do think it's possible that he could just retire halfway through the year. And in round 4, there's still a ton of great players available with a ton of upside. And I think Ovi is more so on the decline than on the uprise. Round 5, there's still some great picks available. And Mackenzie Weegar is a fantastic pick. The only issue is that he does come with a little bit of risk this year. Zane Parekh is kind of looming in and around the opportunity for him to take over power play 1 from Weegar. And if that is the case, I think at his ADP, I'm not interested in really drafting a defenseman that's going to get me 35 points. I know that his peripherals are very good. If you don't count hits or blocks in your league, then he's kind of just like not relevant in general. But I do think there's a very strong possibility that if Zane Parekh makes the team, he is the power play 1 defenseman in Calgary. If not, he's going to get reps on power play 1 and kind of take that away from Weegar. I also think that the Flames could potentially end up selling a lot of their players this year. So just overall, in general, the offense is going to get worse, even though there are some young players like Connor Zary, like Matt Coronado, that should take a bit of a step this year. I'm just not thrilled about taking Weegar when there's so many good defensemen available that are power play 1 studs. And like I said, the possibility of him losing out on that power play 1 is enough for me to kind of not necessarily not take him, but avoid him given his current ADP. And then Roman Josi is just a wild card this year, guys. Like, who knows what's going to happen? He could play 15 games and then call it quits. He could play the full season and be completely fine and be the Roman Josi that we know and love. Or he could just play, like 5 games or 60 or 50. Nobody knows. This is the point. Nobody actually knows how this injury is going to impact him moving forward. It's a cardiovascular thing. It's, I think, something that they're going to have to monitor on a game-to-game basis. So I'm curious to see how that turns out for Josi. But again, just the fact that there's so many good, readily available power play 1 defensemen, even up until like ADP like 70, I would just rather go with a safer option, in my opinion. Round 6, Robert Thomas, and his ADP has actually dropped quite significantly from when we last talked about him, and I still think there's some really good players available in round 6, or at least around that range. Guys like Wyatt Johnson, guys like Elias Pettersson, you've got, DeBrincat in that range as well, like guys that have really good shot volume and really good goal upside. And even though Thomas could be in and around like 80 to 85 points this season, I know some of you think that he could be a 100-point player. I'm not 100% sold on that just yet, but my biggest concern is obviously the shot volume, the lack of peripherals, and the lack of goal scoring for Robert Thomas. So again, he is only center eligible, and I think there are better centers that are available that you can get at a value later in your draft. So for me, I just would not pick Robert Thomas given his ADP. Dustin Wolf, and I was also considering Stolarz here as well, just given the fact that Wool does dip into his volume a little bit. But given the fact that Wool's taking a leave of absence, I decided to omit Stolarz from this video and go with Dustin Wolf. I think Dustin Wolf is going to be a fantastic goalie in the National Hockey League. He's been elite outright all throughout his career. He is going to play a ton of volume for Calgary going into next season, but I worry again with the fact that Calgary could just start selling pieces. They might not be as good as they were last year. It seems like pretty much Rasmus Andersson is on his way out the door. It's a given at this point. So I think, again, I want to just see another year out of Wolf. It's very possible that the 9-10 save percentage could be his floor, but again, that's a little bit of risk that I'm not willing to take, especially on a goalie. He's a bit of a high risk, high reward pick. So just, I think, again, you can get some solid goaltending later in your drafts at a better discount. And I just want to see more of a sample than 1 year out of Dustin Wolf. Moving on to round 7, we have Noah Dobson of the Montreal Canadiens. Dobson, we were really high on and have been high on the past couple seasons. I think what really changed this year was his move to Montreal kind of forced him into a power play 2 role. I don't anticipate them playing 2 defensemen on that top unit. Lane Hudson will be the power play 1 defenseman in Montreal for the next decade, which kind of leaves Dobson in a tough spot. The team should get better, but I am worried as to how that's going to affect Dobson's point totals. I would rather take, again, a power play 1 defenseman. We always preface that. And with Dobson's limited role on power play 2, I think that he's going to see a dip in his production moving forward. So I think there are better options available in round 7. And then our honorable mention is Dougie Hamilton. Dougie should be the power play 1 defenseman to start up until Luke Hughes signs his contract. If that happens, then I do think there is a possibility that Dougie Hamilton does become the power play 2 defenseman in New Jersey. I think Luke Hughes is that talented. The other issue with Dougie is that he's just incredibly injury prone. He's never a good bet to play a full season or even up until that 75 game mark. So there is some concern with me for Dougie going into next season. He's great on a per game basis and should slot into that power play 1 role in New Jersey. I know a lot of you talk about the handedness of some of the players on that top power play and how Dougie would be the only right-handed shot. I think that is a good point. But even if that's the case, just the injury concerns kind of scare me off of him a little bit. And like I said, I do think there is a possibility that Luke Hughes does end up on that top power play unit. And again, I know you guys have talked about the handedness, but if Dougie goes down, are they not going to play Luke Hughes on that top power play because he's left-handed? I don't think so. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I think that Dougie just has a little bit too much risk associated to him. Same situation with Miro Heiskanen. I think we've seen the emergence of Thomas Harley. I think he is going to be the power play 1 defenseman outright on Dallas this season. We've seen it already in early training camp that Harley is that power play 1 guy. So Heiskanen does lose a little bit of his value. He's an incredible player in real life, guys. Don't get me wrong. Like one of the best defensemen in the National Hockey League. When it comes to fantasy hockey, his peripherals aren't the best. They're not bad by any means, but he really relies on that point total and would see a huge benefit if he was that power play 1D in Dallas. I just think Thomas Harley has emerged and established himself as that power play 1D moving forward. And then Dylan Larkin, again, there's really good options still here for forwards in round 8. If you guys go back to my previous video for best picks in this round, there's still a great amount of options for ADP. And Larkin is likely gone at this point in round 8, but if for whatever reason he is there, I think you could consider him. But the thing with Larkin is that his ceiling is kind of tapped out already. He'll get you around 30 goals. He'll get you around 220, 230 shots. So he's a bit of a floor pick in my opinion, and there's still some good forward talent in that range. Round 9 is Kiefer Sherwood. If you're in a Bangers Pims league, this guy's gone by round 9. If you're not, why are you drafting him in round 9? Even if you count hits in your league, it's very possible that Sherwood ends up on the 4th line in Vancouver, given their current lineup. I get that he's going to get you around 400 hits, and I'm not sold on the fact that he's going to be a 20 goal scorer going into next year again. Again, if you're in a categories league, I think this is a great pick if you count hits. But outside of that, there isn't really much reason to draft Kiefer Sherwood in round 9. For honorable mention, Tom Wilson, I'm pretty hesitant on him going into next season. He shot almost 20%, and last year he was around that 10% mark. It's the first time ever he scored over 30 goals. So I think the numbers are going to come down for not only him, but a lot of the Washington Capitals players. Basically, their entire top 6 had career years in shooting percentage last year. So I would be a little bit hesitant about Tom Wilson. He's still going to get you a good mix of hits. He's a bangers, pims, fantastic player. So if you're in a categories league, or if you do count penalty minutes, he jumps up that list. And I think he's very warranted at that range, even probably avid reach on him at that point. But I think if you're in a standard league that does count hits, I would still be hesitant around round 9. There's still a ton of upside available for some of the forwards within this range. And I do think that Wilson's stats are a little bit overinflated based off of what we saw from last year. Round 10 is Luke Hughes, which completely contradicts my opinion on him up until this point. I'm really high on Luke Hughes. I think he's going to be the power play 1 defenseman in New Jersey this year. There's a ton of upside for him. He's basically got a 45 point floor at this point. Not much to say about him. I'm super high on him, but he's on this list because he does not have a contract. So I'm not taking him in this ADP range. I think that you can wait on him a little bit more in your drafts. If you get him a little bit later, that's great value. But again, it's very possible that this bleeds into the season and he's just taking up a roster spot on your team for the foreseeable future until he signs a contract, if he signs a contract. So it's going to depend on that. And I don't think I would take him in that range anymore, even though I am pretty high on him this season. It's very risky at this point. Nobody really knows. It seems like they're still pretty far apart in contract negotiations. So for me, I would avoid Luke Hughes in round 10. And then Pyotr Kochetkov, the lack of volume is really my biggest criticism of Kochetkov. He should split time with Freddie Andersen moving forward. I know Freddie does have a significant injury history and typically doesn't stay healthy throughout the course of the season, but when they are both healthy, they split time 50-50. And I need to see better numbers out of Kochetkov for me to warrant that pick, just given the lack of volume, in my opinion. So that's where we're at with round 10 and the honorable mention. Round 11 is Matt Duchene, and I think there's a possibility this year where Duchene just ends up being a third line player. You've seen Mikko Rantanen come into the fold, and that's kind of bumped him back down both at 5-on-5 and on the power play. He won't be on power play 1 this year, or at least that's not what we're seeing up to this point. He is center right wing eligible, which is warranted. And I think that, again, he's coming off of a massive season where we typically see him within that 60 to 50 point range. He hit 80 points last season. So I think his numbers are a bit inflated. I think there are better options available for you guys in this round 11 that still have a ton of upside. And then for our honorable mention, we have Jacob Slavin of the Carolina Hurricanes. He doesn't really do anything. He's basically like a 30-point defenseman. Doesn't get any power play time. If you don't count plus minus in your fantasy hockey leagues, there's really no reason to kind of pick him within this range at all. And then round 12, we have Jack McBain. Again, similar story to what we saw from Kiefer Sherwood last year. I don't think he's going to score quite as much as what we saw. He is dual eligible. He gets you a ton of hits. He doesn't really shoot. Doesn't do anything but hit, pretty much, guys. So I would not draft Jack McBain in round 12. Gustav Forsling is honestly not a bad pick in this range, just given the fact that he's got a pretty good shot volume and will get you around 30 points. But he's just a better real-life defenseman than in fantasy hockey. He doesn't really do too much outside of the shot volume, which, albeit, is good. But at the same time, doesn't get any power play time. Maybe he's on power play 2s at some points. But I think with Seth Jones coming to the fold, it'll likely be Aaron Ekblad on that bottom unit. And again, similar to Slavin, I think it's kind of just like leagues that count plus minus that is kind of pushing his ADP up. But I just don't think that Forsling has a ton of value going into next season outside of his floor of 30 points and around 180, 190 shots. That will do this video, guys. Thank you for watching. Hopefully this one provided you guys a little bit more value than the last one. Again, apologies, open to feedback on either of these videos. I think the premise of the video is good in getting a sense as to where you should be picking players within each range. It's just hard for us to kind of go off of anything else other than Yahoo ADP because we can't predict who's going in your drafts at all. So it's hard to kind of come to a general consensus, but again, very much open to feedback. So leave a comment down below as to how you, if you didn't like the video, how you would like to see it improve for next time, and we'll take that into consideration. But again, as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. We've got a ton of great content coming up for the rest of the week. We've got more sleepers vids. We've got elite breakouts coming at the end of the week. So stay tuned for that. The content will be there. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.